let's talk a little bit about subscriber growth, because View has had subscriber growth at a time where the category seems to have slowed a little bit, but View's growth stayed ahead. Why do you think, in terms of content and partnership, Southeast Asia, what's driving this growth?
I think what's driving the growth, two things. One, I talked a lot about content, and I think, this morning as well, you hear whether it's Korean content, local content, and we can take a page, right, from the AMPG report. I think your observations are correct in your report that obviously while Korean content is still categorically driving more, the pan-regional consumption, we are seeing that across the markets, local content continues to be important. And in a lot of the markets, I can say in Thailand, in Indonesia, almost like 40–50% of our usage are now coming from local content or our View originals, which is a sort of widening, right? A reflection of the widening of the content portfolio that we have. So that's number one. Number two is, apart from distribution partners, I mentioned new deals, for example, with Astro, but also in terms of partnership with payment players. So whether it's True Money, whether it's UnionPay, whether it's SCB in Thailand, we've really extended that partnership with payment partners as well. And those are really helping us to drive the next layer of growth. And then thirdly is really getting into the non-metro areas, because we've been around for about 6–7 years. We are still, I would just say, scratching the surface in terms of our penetration in a lot of these larger markets, but 50–80% of the population are living in non-metro areas, and so the next phase of growth, that's where it's going to come from.
Got it. Also, price increases. So you have pushed through a few, and you mentioned kind of expanding into non-metro areas. How do you see yourself balancing that price increase that is necessary for your monetization versus not losing out on that expanding of your audience?
Yeah, so over the course of the last few years or last 24 months, we have selectively, for segments of customers and in various markets, increased probably our pricing by about 11–30%, depending on the market. But as I mentioned, as we penetrate the non-metro cities, we still have to make ourselves accessible in terms of pricing, in terms of the way we operate. And by having an AVOD model, I think helps, because that is obviously one way that we introduce our service to new consumers while also monetizing. And at the same time, keeping that initial market entry price affordable is also super important, because remembering that there is still the data charge, right, that people have to pay for. Even though I do see, and I think there was some discussion about that this morning as well, in many of the markets that we're in, there's a lot of mergers of the telcos, consolidation, which we're seeing a speeding up of even more, fixed and mobile adoption. I think our new partnership with Canal Plus, we are having a lot of different conversations to find synergies between us. Vietnam is one of the conversations. We're exploring many things at the same time. So I will save that, hopefully have something new to talk about then next year when we come. But certainly new markets, as well as how we work together in existing markets, is part of the conversation. We're in South Africa, and it's definitely a market where we see platform revenue, both AVOD and SVOD, growing quite strongly. The new partnership with Canal Plus also allows us to explore even wider Africa conversations as well. We are looking to enhance our content proposition there. For example, investing into local content is one of the new themes there. So apart from just looking at acquiring the Korean content, we're investing into Korean View originals, but we're also been adapting, right, the Korean IPs into local language. So for the rest of the world, apart from Asia, we do see original language, original Korean content does work, but I think we really look at that content in a different aspect. So we've done, for example, in Asia, a few adaptations, whether it's 2 seasons of the IP Black. We've also we're actually right now in production for W for the market of Malaysia. So we do see that we can take these Korean IPs to the rest of the world by adapting it.
Understood. And I think you mentioned how, let's talk a little bit about content since we're mentioning it. You mentioned local originals, adaptations. What are those types of titles doing for the business? Are they necessarily attracting new subscribers, or do you see it more of a retention and engagement driver?
It has to be both, because in the streaming business, unlike the traditional pay TV business, people are not signing on for 24 months. So every day you're acquiring new customers, every day you're trying to retain customers. So you always have to have new content on offer to both attract and retain. Having said that, again, it's back to that very first point, right? Getting to some profitable growth. We are now. In the old days, you call it programming, perhaps, right? However you schedule your content, but we have to time the release of our content much more carefully now, in front of the paywall, behind the paywall, even throughout the cycle on how we deliver these contents. At the same time, we are looking at a wider set of content. We're seeing that the theme of non-scripted content is another way for us to explore new growth. Other new categories of content popping up. So for this year, our drivers of content, apart from obviously the View Original Taxi Driver 2, right now we have Escape 7. These are great Korean titles. But this year we also had a Chinese title, Fireworks of My Heart, which really taken almost all of our Asian markets as a #1, #2 title. So we're seeing new emerging categories. In terms of local content, obviously we're looking at Bad Boys Crazy Girl Season 2. We've had Marriage with Benefits also for the Indonesian markets. So there are other content titles that we feel really fill out the proposition for us.